focusing on equity and P through 12 issues, plus others. She's a consultant for the National School Board Association, particularly in equity-related issues. She has a master's in education policy. My current most interesting tidbit for her is that she served 2.5 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in Senegal, West Africa, focusing on the creation of a self-sustaining infrastructure for a rural community. And to us, the most important thing is she was LEV's June Activist of the Month. So just as a reminder, remember that you can use the chat function to ask a question or tell us something during Mary's speech. Now I'd like to welcome Mary.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks very much. Oh, are we going to be getting an echo? Okay, I'll go ahead and continue talking, and they'll let me know if there's an echo or if it's just me hearing it. So today's webinar is going to cover overarching goals, funding of the Student Succeeds Act, the significant changes in title programs and their equity implications.
Hello, Mary. This is Eric Corman with you know that the echo is pretty strong right now, so it sounds like the microphone on your computer that you're using is also duplicating the audio from the telephone. So if there's a way that you can step away from your computer or turn off the microphone, then there'll be no more echo.
All right, I'm going to step away from the computer. That's probably the easiest and the quickest. How is that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, all right. So we're going to be on the second slide, and I will repeat what the overarching goals are for today's webinar. And those are going to be looking at what are basically the overarching goals of what is happening with the Every Student Succeeds Act, what the significant changes are in the Title I programs and their equity implications. And I'm going to do a brief overview of what Washington State's ESSA implementation process is. So on the next slide, we're going to just dive right into what some of the overarching issues are. So one of the big changes from No Child Left Behind is that there has been a significant decrease in the hands-on role of the Department of Education in accountability, and it has significantly increased the role of the SEA, the State Education Association, which for us is OSPI. There is a very strong equity focus embedded throughout the legislation. This was originally signed into law as a civil rights piece of legislation. And one of the significant things happening is that Title III has been where English language learners are housed. It is being moved to Title I because there's been a strong feeling that this particular subgroup of students has not been getting the attention that they need under the last version of this, which was No Child Left Behind. One of the biggest issues going on at the federal level related to this is the supplement, not supplant language that has been a part of the negotiated regulations piece, and there was no consensus reached. And the big issue related to this is the issue of Title I dollars going to and non-Title I schools, and there being parity between the two and how much is actually expended. There has been a big issue, particularly in districts that have both Title I and non-Title I schools, with there actually being more dollars spent in the non-Title I schools. And so this is an attempt by the Department of Ed to get more of an equitable distribution, and that has caused a number of issues that would be its own webinar. But for our purposes, just know that this is out there and it is still under discussion, because since no consensus was reached, it means the Department of Ed is responsible for developing regulations, which at this point, if they include this language for parity, the Senate, at least, being led by Senator Lamar Alexander, one of the primary people, along with Senator Patty Murray, who helped develop this and pass it, has said that he will be fighting that when it comes to them for funding. The third piece of this as a significant change is that the state plans are intended to include both aspirational and compliance elements. This is something that all of us who are concerned about this need to be paying attention to, because No Child Left Behind era really focused on a lot of compliance, and so there is still this obsession with the compliance piece. And while compliance is important, it means that the aspirational side of this is not being looked at as closely, and we have a narrow window of time with a tremendous opportunity for us to be able to be making a significant difference and an impact in what our state plan says on the aspirational side, which is really more going on the foundation of the civil rights and equity piece. Another, next slide, the other significant changes is that the Department of Ed is prohibited from forcing or encouraging adoption of a specific set of standards. This is definitely going to be a state plan decision, and that's another reason why we do need to be engaged and looking at what is coming out from the subgroup to see what types of standards are being recommended, and we do have the ability as the public to be providing input. Another significant change is that states may pick their own goals, both long-term and interim, but they must do the following three things. They have to address English proficiency, and this is related to the example I just gave of Title III English language learners being put into Title I to make sure that this is not being overlooked by districts. A second requirement is to include graduation rates as a goal, and test proficiency, which there's a number of discussions going on around what that exactly means. And then we have to pick at least one more standard, but that is at a minimum. The state can pick others that we are also looking at in the context of both long-term or short-term goals. And there is a requirement that the expectations for subgroups that are furthest behind must be, there has to be expectations set related to closing achievement and graduation gaps. So we're always concerned about the funding piece of this. And so I'm going to talk about some things related to funding now that are also changes. This, the current version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is deferring to decision makers at the state and the local level to determine where and how funding should be allocated and used. This is, again, one of those changes that is giving much more flexibility to the states and the locals on what is happening. But we will be guided by what goes into the state plan, so your local education agency, your local districts definitely need to be engaged in this conversation. The other thing that is changed is the transparency piece, and this is going to be something that's actually in alignment with what we're trying to do in the state, is trying to figure out how we actually are spending money at the school level. So we are going to have to be doing a number of pieces of documentation and making it publicly available, and it does need to be in a format where it can be easily understood by our public. On the next slide, there's also some changes in specific title programs related to funding. Title V, which is the State Innovation and Local Flexibility portion of the title program, has now been amended to allow the state and the local to transfer funds between programs under Title I, II, III, IV, and V. This is significant, particularly for high-need districts, because we're now going to be allowed to braid funding that we receive under these different title programs, and it means we're not going to be leaving money on the table, which can occasionally happen if you, for example, you have used up your money under Title II, which is professional development and training, and you still have needs, but now you've got some money sitting in Title III or Title I. You could now use it to be able to complete professional development programs that you wanted to undertake, as opposed to not being able to do that. So this is a change that we're very happy to see. because there is no way that the federal government is really going to know how much we need at the local level under these different title programs, because it does change based on what your student need is. Under Title IV, which is the separate 21st century schools, and that there was concern that this was going to be eliminated, and it's still there, but the change has been that there's a lot of programs that have been consolidated into a block grant. And I've just listed a few there that are covered underneath that particular Title IV heading. And in this particular case, while there have been authorized amounts for all of the different title programs, I just pulled this particular one to give you an example, because it is it's been a significant change doing the block grant. And the other thing to keep in mind is that while these amounts have been authorized for fiscal year 17 and fiscal year 18, they have not been appropriated, which means that Congress has not actually said, yes, we will be giving you this amount of money. The good thing is that both Senator Alexander and Senator Murray do sit on the Budget Committee, and they will be shepherding this through so that at a very minimum, the amounts that have been authorized under the different title programs are going to be recommended to be funded, meaning appropriated. This is an area where you can do some effective advocacy. We are asking people who are concerned about the different title programs that you at least communicate with your legislators saying, please at least appropriate the amounts that have been authorized. The next slide is also a change in funding, and this is related to Title III, which is specific to language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. And these funds, which generally had been under Title II, which is that's where professional development has been housed, you can now use Title III for PD for teachers and other personnel who specifically work with English language learners to promote family literacy activities and to be used to promote parent outreach and engagement. And we're encouraged to see this, that there is a focus on families and not just on the student. The next slide is also a significant funding change under Title II. I've mentioned that this is for your preparing, training, and recruiting staff. And the allocation model is now changed, and this is something that we're happy to see for districts that are high needs, because this is the shift is going to be taking place where they're what they look at is how many children you have, 15 to 17-year-old, and then how the share of them living in poverty. So this is very much impacted by your state population in general. And as you can see from this graph, what is being recommended is that in 2017, this is actually the same allocation model percentage-wise as is currently in effect for 2016. But in 2018 to 20, there's going to be a shift so that it's looking more closely at the percentage of children in poverty. For Washington State, this is important because we are continuing to have an increase of children who are considered living in poverty. And just as a point of reference, what we're currently receiving per child in Washington is $1,230 per student. To put that in context, the highest state receiving money is Wyoming at $2,600, followed by Vermont, North Dakota, Alaska, DC, and Delaware. The interesting thing is these are small states, or they have smaller populations, and they're getting a larger amount of money. If you look at California and Texas, they are closer to what Washington is getting. So this shift to a higher percentage of children in poverty is going to have a positive effect on the amount of dollars that we'd be receiving. The next significant change on the next slide is a brand new section that has been added under Title I, and this is to encourage districts to consider looking at weighted student funding as a way of allocating your dollars. This particular section was promoted and included at the with the support of Senator Bennett from Colorado. He is their former equivalent of our OSPI superintendent, and Colorado has implemented weighted student funding very successfully. And this is a way to try and promote it for districts that would be interested in giving it a try. Weighted student funding is basically a funding method that drives dollars out based on student need. So you have a base amount, whatever your basic education allotment is that the state determines, and then the things that we have is currently categorical, like students in poverty or ELL students or special ed or gifted or whatever other categoricals you want to choose. There's a weight or a particular amount that goes with the student, so the dollars are following the student and are determined based on need, which then funds how you are providing support for students, whether it be programs, whether it be staffing, etc. So the way this has been set up is that initially 50 school districts, it doesn't mean one per state, it just means up to 50 for the first 3 years, are going to be able to consolidate their federal, state, and local funding. So being allowed to do the kind of braiding and blending that we haven't been allowed to do at this point to better serve students and really meet local needs. The local district is going to be able to create their own student need-based formulas. And the way this is going to happen is that they'd be doing an application to the Department of Ed, which would then be approved. It would also then require a waiver from the state, and we don't have any information really more than that about how this is going to play out. The department is in the middle of writing the regulations, doing the application, and trying to figure these out. But this at this point in time, this is not the one that is the highest important item on their agenda. So the information I've been able to get from them is that they're anticipating this would be implemented during the 2017-2018 school year. So now we're going to quickly go over what the implementation process is and our structure in Washington State. And so this next slide has the graph showing the 11 subgroups that are work groups that are working on different aspects. Those recommendations are going to filter up to what's called the Consolidated Plan Team, which has about 50 people, or give or take, representing folks from the legislature, from OSPI, the governor's office, the different education entities with the superintendent, school board association, the teachers union, principals, some representation from communities of color, and a number of other people. And they're going to be charged with taking the information that from the work groups and putting it together in a plan. And then you can see how this all is, it filters up to the superintendent of public instruction. It is going to have to also pass muster through the governor's office, which needs to sign off on it. And so there's going to be quite a bit of going on with that. The next slide talks about the different types of representation on the plan team, which I pretty much just gave to you. So we'll move on to the next one, where I thought it would be helpful for you to see a little bit of how the responsibilities for this play out among some different agencies. So OSPI does have the ultimate responsibility in being the key decision maker for development and implementation of our plan, but they are required under ESSA to be consulting with state leadership, district and school representatives, and our professional organization representatives, and they're to be facilitating all the meetings. So all of the work groups that we just saw, they are facilitated by a lead person from OSPI, but because the State Board of Education also under our RCWs has responsibility for accountability, that particular one is being co-chaired by Ben Rarick and Gil Mendoza, representing both OSPI and SBE. The next slide does talk about the specific things that the State Board is responsible for. In this particular case, because they also already had an achievement and accountability work group, that group was reconvened, and they are part of the accountability work group, but there are also additional people that are a part of that particular one. The next slide also goes into some more elements that, that the state board is responsible for under the accountability piece. And that particular work group has been meeting a lot, as has been the Effective Educators group, because there are a lot of things that need to be defined, and because of the significant changes with the state being able to choose what some of our goals are, what type of standards we have, there's a lot of work going on in that particular group. The other organization that has a significant role on the next slide is the Professional Educator Standards Board. And they are also very much engaged in the Effective Educators work group, and they have a number of things they are tasked with, which is including reviewing the approved Washington Equity Plan and ensuring that the components of that are included in what is happening with our Effective Educators recommendations. Next slide is our timeline. And what I wanted to do with this is that it is important to understand that OSPI is doing this work, but basically no funding that's been appropriated from the federal level to be doing it, like all the other states. And they are trying to work within a timeline that they're trying to have make sense, but it's also taking place in tandem with what the Department of Ed at the national level is doing regarding development of regulations in different areas. So this potentially could affect our state work if we're going in a direction and have a timeline for it, but the regulations that come out of the Department of Ed are different, and we will have to adjust to that at the state level. There's definitely a lot of hope that that's not going to be happening, but everyone's prepared for the fact that it might be, and we'll just have to adjust. So at this point in time, since we're in July, the work groups are doing a lot of meetings. I serve on the Early Learning Committee, and we just released our draft recommendations that will be up on the OSPI website for public input. So definitely encourage you to take a look at those, and if this is an area you're concerned about, to be providing feedback to our group. We're hoping to be able to finalize our work and submit our plan, our draft recommendations to the Consolidated Plan team. And then the different work groups will be doing presentations to the Consolidated Plan team between September and October, and responding to questions as they start putting the draft together. On the next slide, it continues our timeline, and the hope is that we'd be able to finalize a draft consolidated plan in November to present to Superintendent Dorn and to the Governor. And part of this process is that we are required to have a 30-day public comment time on the draft consolidated plan for people to be able to provide input. The original plan then was to submit the state's draft plan to the Department of Education in December, January. And under the law, the Department of Ed has 120 days or 4 months to review and approve the plan. And the law also states that full implementation is going to be required to start at the beginning of the 2017-18 school year. Now, one of the changes that has potentially come up that we're trying to confirm is that the Department of Ed may not be ready to accept plans until March. And if that is the case, that could potentially cause a number of problems. The one I'll focus on that's going to be significant for school districts is that since we would not anticipate that the Department of Ed would be applying or approving our plan much before that 120 days, that's going to be pushing up against our state requirements for school districts to be doing their budgets and submitting them for approval to OSPI. It could also be impacting our ability to be able to retain staff, hiring issues, and contracts, because if we don't know if the plan is approved, if we don't know if we have to make adjustments, if we don't know how much money we're actually going to be receiving because it hasn't actually been appropriated yet, All of those things are going to be impacting our ability at the district level to have a timely way of getting our budgets done. So the next slide is also the regional forums that OSPI has sponsored. The very last one I want to draw your attention to because it's today. And if you live in the area around the Highline School District or it's an easy commute for you, I would highly encourage you to be able to make the effort to attend this. You'll be able to get more information about what's going on at the state level, and you'll get the latest information, and you'll have a chance to participate in public comment about any issues that you're concerned about. The last issue, or the last slide that I have here for you is a slide of resources, and this is going to be available on the LEV website. If this is something you really want to be kept in the loop on information-wise, the very first two resources are the sign-ups at both the Department of Ed website and the OSPI website so that you can get notifications as information is being added related to regulations at the national level and related to the work groups and the Consolidated Plan team at the state level. The rest of these are some really good summaries of different aspects of the law and with some specific issues, so that if you would like to know more, the very last one, Accountability in Poverty, is a very well-written blog looking at the issue of policies and specifically the accountability part of this and the caution that people need to be using, that it's not going to be negatively affecting low-income students and other equity issues related to that. So at this point, that was what I wanted to share, and we are available for questions.
Thank you so much, Mary. We're going to go over by about 10 minutes for questions. We've got several that have come in already. Please type your questions in the chat feature on the right-hand side of the screen. If you have additional questions, I'm going to point out a couple of things just in case you are going to log off. And that is, remember that this is recorded and will be put up on our website. And remember that we will have part 2 of this seminar on ESSA on Thursday from 12:30 to 1, where we will take a slightly deeper dive on a few issues that we believe are important to the state of Washington, issues like parent engagement and English language learners. And when we do that, we're looking at how does that affect our state and all the way down to our communities. I'd also like to remind you that Mary is a consultant, and if your organization needs some help around this issue, she's available. I'm doing a personal plug. And that, as you can tell, she's quite knowledgeable on the subject. So now I'm going to start with, I always like to start with an easier question. Could you just give us a little bit more? I know you're going to do a deeper dive next Thursday on parent and community engagement portion of ESSA.
Yeah, I'll do this just as a teaser, but for people who are very concerned about community and parent engagement, you should be very encouraged, and I think this is one of the big opportunity areas in the new law, because parent engagement has been highlighted. It has language specific to including parents and community voice into the different aspects of the title programs has been added. So there are multiple areas where there are requirements now for parent voice to be incorporated into what we're doing. And so that's the overall, and if you can't participate on Thursday, that one will also be posted, and it will have PowerPoint slides that are specific to some of the changes related to parent engagement.
Thank you. Earlier on, Mary, you mentioned that there were 2 senators who were asking people to speak up around funding. One was Senator Murray. Who was the other, and what is the specific message we should be communicating?
Oh, okay. Our 2 senators that we would want to be communicating with are Senator Patty Murray, who was one of the prime movers as the ranking member of the Education Committee on the Democrat side of the Senate. and Senator Maria Cantwell. So those are the two senators that we can be communicating with, since we are constituents and they very much care what we have to say. The other people that we would want to be communicating with are our House of Representatives delegates for Washington State, because at some point in time, once the House and the Senate Education Committees have worked through the budget piece of this, it's going to be voted on, and that's going to go back to that piece of the message we would like to be communicated to all of them is, please at least fund what has been authorized under the ESSA plan that is already in law. We, of course, would love to have more funding going in, but what we don't want to see is that the budget committees are going to be proposing something that is a cut in any one of the title programs.
Thank you. The 50 school districts who can consolidate their funding sources, will that be the 50 across the U.S. or is it in each state?
That's a 50 total across the United States, but that should not be interpreted as one district per state. This is completely up to the local school district whether they want to apply to be considered as one of the 50 pilot school districts. So it's not, the ideal would be actually, if a state was interested in this particular way of allocating money, it would be really good if you had a district that had very high ELL population or very high poverty, if it was a large district or a medium-sized or a rural district, so that you can see during the pilot how this is going to have an impact on student outcomes when you're able to drive dollars to actually meet student need, but be able to see it in different types of settings.
Mary, throughout the presentation you said that it was possible to give feedback right now. How would people go about doing that?
Okay, a great question. The link that I mentioned that is on the OSPI ESSA website, there is a listing there of every one of the 11 work groups. All of the groups are required to post the notes from their meetings within about 48 hours of having that meeting. And like I said, for early learning, we have today posted our draft recommendations for feedback. So if you go to those links, you can see what's been put up there. They also list the lead for the OSPI lead for each one of the work groups with their email contact information, and anyone can be sending an email with their feedback, and you can copy whoever you want, and they've got the list of all of the participants on the different work groups. If you know someone personally, contact them personally. I've encouraged everyone I know that if I'm on the early learning one, if you have feedback, please contact me, and I will be making sure that I'm giving that feedback back to our work group.
That's fantastic, Mary. Thank you. There's also a webinar on ESSA. If you cannot make the Burien forum tonight, the webinar is August 1st at 6 p.m.
Fabulous.
Public notice. So I think this is probably our last question. The public transparency around the funding is an interesting federal new rule. Will the public be able to give input on what that looks like? Because when I heard you speak, this is my own question. When I heard you speak, Mary, I heard that it was supposed to be readable by community. And so do you know if they'll ask for feedback from community on whether or not it is readable?
Well, whether or not they ask for it, you should be providing that as a member of the public if it's not. And I'll say that as a board member. I need to know that if it's causing a problem for people in my community to understand what we're doing, I need to know that so that we can change it. I'm used to looking at these things, and so some stuff that may be intuitive for me may not be intuitive to someone looking at it maybe for the first time. And the point is we've got to make it accessible because these are public dollars going in to fund our students, and so the public has the right to know. And I'll just say that if there isn't a process in place in your local district to provide that input, you should be providing it anyway. I do know most school districts have some type of a budget hearing so that you're presenting to the public what your draft budget is, and that may not be at a time that is accessible or easy for everyone to get to. It should be on the website. This is part of a publicly noticed meeting, but if you have concerns then and you don't see something that's going to give you a forum to be able to provide feedback, I would provide it to your board members anyway.
All right. I think this winds up our first of 2 ESSA LEVinars. I look forward to seeing all of you again, or hearing all of you again, or chatting with you on Thursday from 12:30 to 1. And remember, this is recorded and up on our website, and feel free to share with your friends and colleagues. Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Lev.